The year 1918 dawned upon a world weary of war, a world that had seen unprecedented destruction and loss. For 4 long years, the Great War, later known as World War I, had ravaged Europe and beyond, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Millions had perished in the trenches of the Western Front and on battlefields across the globe, their lives cut short by the relentless conflict. Nations were exhausted, their economies strained, and their populations desperate for peace. The war had taken a toll on every aspect of life. Yet, the conflict raged on, its outcome still uncertain. The battles continued, and the hope for a swift resolution seemed distant. The year 1918 marked a pivotal point in this global conflict, a year that would see significant changes and turning points. It was a year of dramatic offensives, devastating losses, and ultimately, the armistice that brought the fighting to an end. The world watched as history unfolded, but it was also a year marked by political upheaval, social change, and a deadly pandemic that would claim millions more lives. The Spanish flu swept across nations, adding to the misery. The world in 1918 was a world on the brink. Societies were pushed to their limits, and the future seemed uncertain. The old order was crumbling, and a new one shaped by the horrors of war was struggling to be born. The aftermath of the war would reshape nations and ideologies. The events of this tumultuous year would have a profound and lasting impact on the course of the 20th century and beyond. The world would never be the same again as the echoes of 1918 reverberated through history. Amidst the carnage and destruction of World War I, a glimmer of hope emerged from an unexpected source: the United States. President Woodrow Wilson, thrust into the role of international peacemaker, unveiled his 14 points in January 1918. This was a bold and visionary plan that aimed to reshape the world order. This ambitious plan sought to address the root causes of the war and lay the foundation for a lasting peace. Wilson believed that only through addressing these fundamental issues could the world avoid future conflicts. Wilson's vision centered on principles of self-determination, open diplomacy, and the right of all nations to choose their own path. He believed that these principles were essential for a stable and just world. One of the cornerstones of his plan was the establishment of a collective security organization known as the League of Nations. This body was intended to provide a forum for resolving international disputes and preventing future wars. He called for an end to secret treaties, freedom of the seas, and the reduction of armaments. These measures were designed to build trust and reduce the likelihood of future conflicts. The reduction of armaments was particularly important, as Wilson believed that the arms race had been a significant factor in the lead-up to the war. His ideas resonated with war-weary populations, offering a beacon of hope for a better future. People around the world were eager for a new era of peace and cooperation. However, the 14 points were not without their critics. Some saw Wilson's ideas as overly idealistic and impractical. Allied leaders, hardened by years of war, were skeptical of Wilson's idealism. They were more focused on securing tangible gains and ensuring their own national interests. They sought concrete gains and reparations from Germany, whom they held responsible for the conflict. This desire for retribution often clashed with Wilson's more conciliatory approach. Nevertheless, Wilson's vision provided a framework for the post-war negotiations, even if it would ultimately be tested by the harsh realities of international politics. His 14 points left an indelible mark on the peace process and the future of international relations. While the Western Front remained locked in a bloody stalemate, the Eastern Front witnessed dramatic shifts in power. Russia, racked by revolution and civil war, signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in March 1918. This treaty, while granting Russia a much-needed respite from the fighting, came at a heavy price. Russia surrendered vast territories to Germany, including Poland, Finland, and the Baltic states. The treaty effectively ended Russia's participation in World War I, allowing Germany to shift its focus and resources to the Western Front. This development, while initially beneficial to Germany, would ultimately prove to be a double-edged sword. The collapse of the Eastern Front had profound implications for the region. It created a power vacuum that would have lasting consequences, contributing to the rise of new states, the spread of communist ideology, and the outbreak of future conflicts. On the Western Front, the year 1918 began with a renewed German offensive. The German High Command, desperate for a breakthrough, saw this as their last chance to turn the tide of the war in their favor. With fresh troops freed from the Eastern Front, Germany launched a series of massive assaults, hoping to break through the Allied lines and secure a decisive victory before American reinforcements could arrive in force. These offensives were meticulously planned and executed with precision, aiming to exploit any weaknesses in the Allied defenses. The German offensives, though initially successful in gaining ground, were ultimately repulsed at a heavy cost. The Allies, though caught off guard, quickly regrouped and mounted a fierce resistance, making every inch of ground gained by the Germans a costly endeavor. The Allies, bolstered by American troops and resources, launched a series of counteroffensives, gradually pushing the Germans back. The arrival of fresh American forces provided a much-needed boost to the weary Allied soldiers, who had been fighting for years. The fighting was as brutal and costly as ever, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The relentless artillery bombardments, machine gun fire and hand-to-hand combat took a severe toll on the soldiers, leaving the battlefields littered with the dead and wounded. New technologies of war, including tanks, airplanes and poison gas, continued to play a deadly role. These innovations, while intended to break the stalemate of trench warfare, only added to the horrors of the battlefield, introducing new ways to inflict death and suffering. The battles of 1918 from the Somme to the Meuse-Argonne offensive were among the bloodiest of the entire war. Each battle saw unprecedented levels of violence and destruction, with both sides determined to achieve a decisive victory. Yet, despite the horrors, the tide was turning. The relentless pressure from the Allied forces combined with the strategic use of new technologies began to wear down the German defenses. By the fall of 1918, Germany's military situation had become desperate. The once formidable German army was now exhausted and demoralized, facing an increasingly confident and well-supplied Allied force. Section 5. Armistice. The guns fall silent. Faced with dwindling resources, mounting casualties and a crumbling home front, Germany sought an armistice in early November 1918. The Allies, eager to end the bloodshed, agreed to negotiate, but only on the condition of unconditional German surrender. On November 11, 1918, at 11 o'clock in the morning, the armistice was signed in a railway carriage in Compiègne, France. The guns fell silent, and the world erupted in celebration. After 4 long years, the Great War was over. The armistice marked the end of hostilities, but it did not bring an end to the suffering. Millions lay dead, and millions more bore the physical and psychological scars of war. The world was a vastly different place than it had been in 1914. Section 6. A pandemic's grip. As if the horrors of war were not enough, the world was also in the throes of a devastating pandemic. The Spanish flu, a deadly strain of influenza, swept across the globe in 1918 and 1919, infecting an estimated 500 million people and killing an estimated 50 to 100 million. The flu pandemic was particularly deadly among young adults, a demographic already decimated by the war. It spread rapidly through the trenches, military camps, and war-torn cities, overwhelming healthcare systems and leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The Spanish flu pandemic was a stark reminder of the fragility of human life and the interconnectedness of the world. It highlighted the importance of public health measures and international cooperation in the face of global challenges. Section 7. Redrawing the Map. The end of World War I brought about significant geopolitical changes. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war and redrew the map of Europe. Germany, held responsible for the war, was forced to cede territories, disarm and pay heavy reparations. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires, once major powers, were dissolved, leading to the creation of new nations such as Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and Turkey. The Baltic states, including Latvia, gained their independence after centuries of foreign rule. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future wars, ultimately sowed the seeds of discontent and resentment. Germany, humiliated and economically crippled by the treaty's harsh terms, would become a breeding ground for extremist ideologies in the years to come. Section 8. Seeds of Future Conflicts. The end of World War I did not usher in an era of lasting peace. The war had left deep scars on the world, both physical and psychological. Nationalism, militarism, and economic rivalries persisted, setting the stage for future conflicts. The rise of totalitarian regimes in Germany, Italy, and Japan, fueled by economic depression and political instability, would ultimately lead to the outbreak of World War II in 1939. The world had learned some lessons from the Great War, but not enough to prevent another global catastrophe. Section 9, 1918, a turning point in history. The year 1918 was a year of profound change and upheaval. It marked the end of an era, the collapse of empires, and the birth of new nations. It was a year of both triumph and tragedy, of hope and despair. The events of 1918 shaped the course of the 20th century and continue to resonate today. The war's legacy is complex and multifaceted. It forced humanity to confront the horrors of modern warfare, the fragility of peace, and the enduring challenges of international cooperation. Yet, it also inspired acts of extraordinary courage, compassion, and resilience. 1918 was a year that changed everything. It was a year that reminded us of the human capacity for both good and evil, and the enduring importance of striving for a more just and peaceful world.